All right, fill in for Eric. Oh, hang on. The August 19th meeting of the Scarborough Planning Board will please come to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Doreen, will you please call the roll?
Rick Munking,
Here.
Jennifer Ladd. Here. Roger Beely,
Here.
Rachel Hendrickson,
Here.
James Hebert,
Here.
and Bennett Flanders.
Here.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for July 15th. And there any corrections or emendations?
I make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Jim Hebert. Doreen, call the roll, please.
Rick Munking,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd. Abstain. Roger Beely,
Yes.
Rachel Hendrickson.
Yes.
James Hebert.
Yes.
Thank you. There is one short item on the agenda before we get to the public hearing. And that is a notice for folks that we are going to be doing a site visit on September 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. The site visit will be held at the Downs with the purpose to view the town center plans. The site visit, while it is open to the public, and we encourage people to attend to hear directly what the plans are for going in terms of going ahead there. There's no comment that will be allowed during that time. We will also have another workshop or a workshop on September 16th prior to the planning board meeting to again discuss the plans for the town center. This is a very important part of the Downs going forward. And a lot of people have been interested in it and what's going to go there. So I do suggest that that you attend, that you come, put your walking shoes on, and hear what some of the plans are for the town center. Thank you. Next item. Item 4.01, the public hearing, proposed amendments to chapter 405 zoning ordinance regarding 1,000-foot setback for cannabis establishments. For the town, Autumn.
Good evening, thank you. This has come from the town manager's office in a very lengthy process to update our cannabis ordinance. This specific ordinance is about cultivation and a 1,000-foot buffer from single-family homes. One item that the council has requested that the planning board weigh in on is whether the 1,000-foot setback should be measured from all residential homes or if it should be measured from a residential zoning district. So that is a specific question. The assistant town manager sent a memo that's in front of you requesting this specific. So if I can elaborate on that, or if you would like to discuss it, I'm happy to give you more information.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so is there a member of the public, either online or in person, who would care to comment? Please approach the podium. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and residence. We have anybody online with a hand up?
No hands up.
In that case, the public hearing is closed. Now turn this over to the board for comments and questions. Jen?
I have a question. Maybe this is splitting hairs, or maybe we're here to split hairs. But when you said measure 1,000 feet from a residence or from a residential district, you mean from like a home or their property line?
So there would be two different scenarios. So we have, for instance, a residential home in a light industrial district.
Mhm.
And so light industrial is an area where cultivation could take place. And so the question that council has asked, should that still count? And so should we measure the 1,000 foot from that front door of any single family residential home to cultivation? Or should we measure the 1,000 foot from the zoning district boundary of a residential zone?
Which would not necessarily
Which
include
would not
all
include
residents.
those homes maybe in
Sure.
outlier districts.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
And so splitting that same hair, you're looking for us to give direction for whether or not that's the edge of the district or reaching a home. Say, for instance, a hypothetical situation, you have 50 acres abutting, 50 acres residential zoned. And a cannabis facility goes into an adjacent lot. It's clearly farther away than 1,000 feet from a home if we were to allow that. And if they were to put a home in it's that 50 acres, that's closer to 1,000 feet with the cannabis structure already there, would the cannabis structure be grandfathered?
That's my understanding. So if the cannabis cultivation is first,
Mhm.
yes.
Okay, thank you. My opinion is that it can, I'd like to see it from the nearest residential dwelling structure, not zone, because that gives the most, I guess, flexibility for businesses and other folks there and whoever was there first.
Thank you. As a reminder, the town council would like to get a sense of the board on where it stands.
I just,
Rick?
for clarification, we're talking 1,000 feet from the front door or from the property line?
So if you do the residential structure, it would be the front door, so it'd be door to door. But if you were to do the zoning district, it could be, the zoning outline itself. Or you could say door to door doesn't make sense and it's property line. So it gives a little bit more flexibility because to James' point, it's a lot
Yeah,
of property.
and that's where I'm coming out on is doing it based on the property line instead of door.
So the property line of an existing
Correct.
residential
Yep.
structure.
Roger?
Um, would this affect any existing cannabis operations if it went from, if we did it from the zoning?
My understanding that it will as they turn over. That's my very general understanding of it. I've not been involved in the whole rewrite.
Because I'm thinking, if we did it from existing, like an existing home,
Mhm.
and that would be the benchmark, the existing homes. Like James said, if somebody else were to move, build a residential unit closer than 1,000 feet, then it really would be up to the resident, the future homeowner to check out to make sure, because they could be within that 1,000 feet and they really wouldn't have any options regarding complaining or anything like that.
I'm actually seeing that this should probably be written with two options. It should be 1,000 feet from any residential district boundary line and 1,000 feet from any existing single-family structure property line in existence as of the adoption of this ordinance. And then you have both cases covered.
Yep.
But, so you get the outliers and then you have the zoning district. So you have the 50 acres zoned for residential, you build a house, you're always covered because it's the outline.
Okay.
I see folks nodding their heads at
better.
what Autumn's suggestion. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I got a question regarding Autumn's suggestion. Are you saying that that would only account for existing homes that exist at the time of the adoption of the ordinance? Because then if someone else were to build a residential home, right next to
They
a
wouldn't be-
cannabis facility,
Right.
then if the cannabis facility next door turns over, suddenly it can't be cannabis anymore? That would be a problem?
No. So the existing homes now that are existing non-conforming homes, they're in the wrong district per se. They would be protected, but we wouldn't allow them to be a new home to be built in like a light industrial zoning district. It's not an allowed use. So They would be protected, those existing homes, and then the zoning district boundary would protect all of your new homes potentially.
Right.
So it's a kind of a catch-all.
But similarly, somebody couldn't just build a home next to a cannabis facility nor with the intention of shutting it down.
No.
That's what I'm just
Not
thinking.
if the cannabis facility has to be in a zoning district.
Of
but a
course.
Single-family home is not allowed.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
okay, good.
Yeah.
That's, then I'm in favor of what you just proposed. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of like what Autumn has suggested. It's not specifically one of the options. As I read the ordinance and the information. But I guess my druthers, if we have no other choice, it would be the 1,000 feet from the home. But I like your suggestion, Autumn. Could you repeat it so that Doreen can make sure that
Sure.
she's got it in part of our information to the town council?
Sure. So the 1,000-foot buffer would apply to the zoning district boundary for all residential zones. It would also apply to any existing single-family structures front door in existence at the time of the adoption of the ordinance. And then you've covered all your bases, I think.
Roger, you look just a little puzzled. You okay? He's okay. All right. Do you have enough, Autumn, to?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on. Next item on the agenda is 4.02, a public hearing, proposed amendments to chapter 405B, site plan review, section 4, performance and design standards, subsection A, site utilization and layout, B, site access, C, internal vehicular circulation, D, parking areas, E, pedestrian ways, space and alternative transportation, I, architecture and signage, and repeal in its entirety, chapter 405B-1, design standards for commercial districts.
Thank you. So this is the final change for the site plan amendment ordinance and the commercial design standards to consolidate the two documents. It's very minimal in what is being changed. In the architectural design standards, the proposed changes include removing duplicates and out-of-date language. Applicability is addressed. We have added definitions, clarified materials. We added the CPD zoning to specific sections, that flat roofs, the material options could be added. And then what we did for the future, worked on this project for almost a year with Long Range Planning Committee, but we designated future village areas. And so we can come back and add those as we go through small area and village plans in the town. So we anticipate having those hopefully one per year in the next few years, so we can start working on that. The site layout design standards also included in this. Again, remove duplicates and out-of-date language, address applicability. This one is very exciting. Reduce aisle width from 25 feet to 24 feet for 90-degree parking. That's very exciting. We do have nearly every site plan we have has that variance. So we've addressed that. We also removed the landscaping requirements from this section because we adopted the landscape requirements in June, and then sidewalks are required rather than suggested. This section also takes out a lot of sign design standards in the commercial because they're already almost verbatim in our zoning ordinance. So we have a whole chapter about signs. The only thing that we added, because there's an implied provision in the commercial design standards that signs come forward with site plans for larger signs. It's not really clear, but this next public hearing, it will be clear. And so there will be a waiver for a larger sign over 20,000 square foot buildings. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let me just remind folks, if you take a look at page 3 of 3 of our material, the text amendment staff report, I want to note the extensive conversations around this. The Long Range Planning Committee, October 13th, November 17th, December 8th, January 12th, February 9th, March 8th. The Ordinance Committee, the Town Council first reading, and now it is before us. So this has been something that has been chewed on, hashed over, and I do want to compliment Autumn and the staff on the work and that they've done to get this done and to get it this far. Now, if there's a member of the public that would like to make a comment, please approach the podium. Anyone online with a hand up?
No.
All right, board comments. Roger?
Thank you. I do want to recognize the effort put in by all these various meetings that you cited, Rachel. And I normally would defer to these people because they do spend a lot of the time. I just have a few things I'd just like to run by some people. Since I've been on the planning board, I've always found it kind of interesting, this term, New England vernacular. I suspect I'm the longest living New Englander on this committee, on this board. And I'd like to know what, right now they're using the term New England building, New England farms, things like that. And can somebody explain to me what that may be?
Go ahead, Autumn, that's yours.
Let me get to the page.
And let me give you an example why I'm mentioning this. Because I've lived in a number of communities in New England. And even in Maine, there's different communities and they have different, historical architectural, I mean, we don't have a downtown, say like Saco or Westbrook all right? And I'm not sure that you can, well, that's another story anyways, but I think you have to, we have to be a little bit more flexible regarding this so-called New England. New England to me is an old mill in the center of town made out of brick or maybe granite or something like that. We don't have that in this town. And,
Sure. Well, so I will tell you that was much, a lengthy discussion through this process. And what we came up with was that the purpose of architectural design standards is to encourage design which draws its inspiration from historical and contemporary New England examples while complementing the neighborhood or village in which the site is located. And so this is this broad brush language, and it leads into the fact that we're going to come back and look at each village separately. We tried to do architectural standards for the whole town, and what we discovered through several of these meetings was it was impossible. Because to your point, every little area has a different standard and a different aesthetic. So what we did is we created a master list, a base list, of roof materials and siding materials and appropriate roof pitch, if you will. And then what we plan to do with each of these areas, say the Oak Hill area or Dunstan, we'll go in and say, okay, in Oak Hill, maybe you can't use metal or a flat roof. Maybe that's not the aesthetic of Oak Hill. And so that's why those sections are reserved in the back. So we had to agree to get the base standards in place and move on because we couldn't find one set of standards that worked for the whole community.
Oh, okay. I understand. I tend to agree with what you're saying. So with that in mind, when I'm looking at this one here, architectural design standards, I would suggest removing a portion of that sentence which states, which draws its inspiration from historical and contemporary New England examples. And I would just have it say the purpose of architectural design standards is while is, wait a minute, I gotta put this, is, then I forgot a word here, while complementing the neighborhood or village to which it is located. In other words, I think that's saying exactly what you're saying, except removing the New England, the term New England. That's all.
Just
In other words, a good example is, what's out at the Downs in the Innovation District. They're all complementary to each other.
and we would call that contemporary New England examples.
That could be contemporary anywhere.
Mhm.
Okay? All right, so anyway, that's one thing and then the other thing it mentioned in here is, signs.
Mhm.
All right? Internal lit signs. Now, in the past, I believe the board has always, urged, the internal lit signs to be dark with white lettering or light lettering.
Right, there are specific standards that are in the,
So that's
sign
still,
ordinance.
that's still in place?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. And by the way, while I'm on that, I happened to be out by, Smart Hill Farm the other day, and I took a ride out to the Aroma Joe's. Remember, we had a big discussion about the signs out there and whether they told us they could change the white to a darker color. Well,
With
it actually-
backlighting.
It does.
Yeah.
They actually do that, okay, so, I was just kind of curious about that. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about benches.
Mhm.
Okay? I agree, you want to have a focal point, and you can, the way I read this, it's still in there somewhere, okay, it's in here.
so
Bench.
the site amenity requirements were in
Yes.
the landscaping standards that we did last time. This one allows for a selection of choices for entrance features. So it's, the benches is in site amenity and
I
landscape.
thought I had it, I read it in one of these.
There is a place in benches, let me see if I can get to it. Yeah. I think you're like talking about the entryway features
Yes.
on page
Which one,
9.
which one are you?
I'm on page 9 and the same architectural design, the color coded. That one's the easy one.
Page 9.
Is that what you're thinking of? Like large scale retail?
Yes. I mean, I have no problem with the seating, seating accommodations or something like that. But I have a problem specifically saying you have to have benches.
Well, this list is just a selection list, so you have to have 2 of the following for your entryway.
Yeah,
So the benches is in a different section that requires seating. This one just says you have to create an entry feature and you can do it one of many ways.
okay. And now, I had this last thing, buildings of these types of uses shall reflect the awareness of New England architectural traditions in their form, detailing and materials. Many planning boards ago, there was a big discussion about branded colors,
Hmm.
all right? And there was a business that wanted to, actually did come to town. It's on Muzzy Road. And they had a certain shade of, I think it was blue or something like that. And it was but it became a big, all right? So how are we dealing with that? Because these businesses, they spend a lot of money on branding, colors and things like that.
Right. But it's the town of Scarborough's, you can decide if that's appropriate for the town or not for the aesthetic. So, I mean, it's done everywhere where you have specific color requirements and they have to adhere to those.
Because over at where Cabela's is, that was originally Famous Dave's over there.
Mhm.
And Famous Dave's originally had a red roof. But to go there, they had to have a green roof.
Mm.
And subsequently, they started using green roofs around the country. That's what I've been told anyways. But I'm just kind of curious about the branding because, if somebody, and we're talking basically maybe primarily signage, or maybe.
Well, these colors don't affect signage.
Yeah.
This is for the building. So,
But they could, they might, a good example is now the credit union, the Atlantic Credit Union going out there. They have a very significant A on their building. That's their brand.
mhm.
Would that that didn't run into any trouble, but
I don't recall it
Okay,
running into any
all right.
trouble. Yeah. I think this would come up, when you had, in one position, we had a similar neutral sort of color requirement, earth tones, if you will, and we had a specific business that their entire facade was turquoise and red. And so in those situations where that's their brand, you can work with them to come up with some banding or some highlights of that color where they still fit in and it's not just a sore thumb. But I think it's definitely in the town's purview to put those standards out there. I think that once we get into the village standards, again, it will be more specific. You may find that one village only has, a color palette specific. So because you're trying to maintain what's already there. And then some of the newer areas that you don't have a kind of a design for, may be very open-ended.
okay. I think I've exhausted my time.
Is there any other comments?
Madam Chair?
Ben, and then I'll do Rick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur that I really appreciate the work that's gone into these standards. One thing that I really, I like to see is strengthening of the sidewalk provisions. I think that's really good to make sure that, again, the more sidewalks we have, the better, in my opinion. I guess I'm just one thing I didn't see in the standards, and maybe it's somewhere else, and maybe I'm a little confused, but it doesn't mention anywhere that you can, if it's impractical to build the sidewalk, you can give money to the fund that the town has. Is that because it's commercial districts only, you're required to have a sidewalk here, or is there some way to get around that scenario where it may be impractical?
I think that's up to the planning board to determine when they come before. If we put that in, it's always going to be impractical. I think the allowance is still there for you all to say, oh, this is a difficult situation, especially if you have the town staff support. So we have a specific one right now, actually on your agenda, that the sidewalk is required, but it is impractical to construct right now. And we have a design for the future, so they will be paying.
So it's, even though it doesn't specifically call it out in a waiver, we can still theoretically waive that if there wasn't a need
that we
to.
could.
I'm not
can
up for
try to
waiving these in
think
most
about it.
cases.
I'm leery of putting it out there as an
Mhm.
option.
That makes sense.
But I will definitely look at it.
I just don't want to tie them to knots. That's the only thing
Right,
I'm
right.
thinking about there. Good. But yeah, otherwise, I definitely appreciate seeing the drive aisle width reduced because that's a waiver every time. Thank you. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Rick?
Yeah, just a couple things. Autumn, on the site plan review under A2, there is a XX percentage on there, and I'm wondering, this is in the first paragraph under number 2, applicability. The expansion of any footprint exceeding XX percent.
Can you show me which?
It's in the site utilization and layout.
Oh. I believe that is supposed to be 50%.
50%. It's reasonable. All right. And then just my other comment is on the one-way width, the land use, it's on page 5 of the same document. We have generating between 10 and 50 truck trips per hour. And then we have one that says generating 50 or more. So if they come in with 50, which one do they follow?
Oh, we can change that to 51.
Okay. And then finally, my last one, it'd be nice to define what access management principles are.
What page is that on?
And that is on page 3, and maybe we could come up with some language for putting it in under 4 definitions. Or is there, I just don't know myself what access management principles are.
It's in the first complete paragraph that starts with all development activities.
So that's existing language. But,
Oh, you're right, it is
Um,
purple.
yeah.
Okay, you're
but-
right.
But that doesn't mean it's great, so we can always fix it if you need a.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, it just doesn't sound like even the first sentence.
We could definitely add a definition. of that.
Even if you repeat the first sentence, just put it in definition. That's all I have. I appreciate all the work. Long-range planning, I know what it's like trying to develop ordinances and fixing some of the stuff. And this has been a lengthy process. And they've been mindful enough to weigh in on what our comp plan says as well. I noticed there was some things in here that is because of our comp plan. So congratulations on getting through this. That's it, Madam Chair.
Jen?
Okay, I am curious if we could add something to, oh, and I don't have the good references that Rick has, I'm sorry, but, on the topic of drive-through lanes and queuing for drive-through lanes. Anyway, the comment says, essentially that queuing for drive-through lanes shall not interfere with vehicle accessibility to the parking area of a site. I don't know. Yeah, sorry. Yep, drive-through lanes. I just wonder if we could add something to that provides clear direction that drive-through lane queuing should also not extend beyond the parcel or into a travel way providing access to a site, or words to that effect. So that if someone was able to design, a drive-through facility on their own site so that it didn't clog up their interior operations, but that there would also be no risk of that drive-through impacting the road that it's coming off of. Sorry, I don't have a more eloquent comment. Well, I think it would depend on the use and the number of gas pumps or windows for coffee or whatever the service is. And maybe that's something that we could look at, at the board level. But it seemed we have had that topic come up before, and I just feel like from a public safety standpoint, that one's really important. And I wouldn't even mention it, but I could kind of see how a site design could lend itself to not hinder itself, but potentially put the right of way at risk for spillover, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Okay, so add something to the effect that queuing for drive-through lanes shall not interfere with the vehicle accessibility to the parking area for the site, neighboring sites, or public
Yeah.
right away,
Yep,
something like
Yep,
that.
I think
Perfect.
that's good. And then expanding a little bit on the comment that Bennett had about sidewalks. I think it would, and actually you providing some insight on the more to come later about neighborhood centers helps with contextualize some of this a little bit, but I think in the meantime, actually, until we have all of those defined, I wonder if there's a way that we could just speak to maybe not requiring a site to tie into a network that doesn't exist, but to at least not preclude that. So if the town doesn't have, take sidewalks, for example, if the town doesn't have a capital improvement project planned for sidewalk work in front of a site, but that there is room in the right of way there to do that someday, that the site be designed so that a connection could be made at some point. And that's similar to language that's included, somewhat similar to language that's included for like parking provisions. So we have said that if you come to us with, you know, an explanation of why your use doesn't meet the minimum parking requirement, that's fine, but we still want you to show on site how you could meet that in the future.
I would respectfully ask that we do not do that.
Are you, can I just clarify,
Yeah.
are you, I'm trying to think of a certain situation where what you're describing would ever come up. And are you saying like a drive-through coffee shop where there is no walk up? Like it's a vehicle, it's, you know, centric kind,
That
I
would
guess
be
like,
great.
I
That would
can't,
drive
because
some nuts
that's the
too,
only
but-
time I think we've come up with a situation where like, okay, a sidewalk doesn't make sense. That's, I guess the only time I can say, even if we do village centers in the future, maybe putting, I guess I'm not finding a situation.
I'm kind of thinking like 2 steps down the road, so maybe we approve a site plan, but the next time that site turns over, if
Mhm.
they've planted a solid wall of trees or
Mhm.
put a retaining wall fully against the right of way, or
Mhm.
whatever other
Yeah,
treatment it
yeah.
is, that, you know, the next time that access becomes more difficult.
But I think in the cases I can think of, that are similar to that. I don't want to point my finger at any particular site, but I have one in mind that I'm thinking it was really on the planning board's decision to say, okay, the landscape buffer is also where the sidewalk will eventually go. And they did the in lieu fee.
Okay,
And now, can I take away their buffer? Or do I build a side, it's like, so
Mhm.
it's really kind of goes back to a site by site then, because you guys kind of made the decision for us that I'm either taking away their plantings or I don't have a sidewalk in the future.
But
I guess I'm-
also, I suppose that you would, when the site is being constructed, that is really the time for the sidewalk to be built. It's everything is on site to do it.
right.
Our fee in lieu doesn't cover our costs down the road. It also, as we move towards pedestrian mobility and really having all this connectivity that the town is trying to get, one thing that we were really proud about in long-range planning was really making sure the sidewalk requirement was stronger.
Required, yeah.
Right, and so, eventually, even though if you build the sidewalk and there's not a sidewalk on either side, as that property on either side of you gets developed, it will be, if it's required and we're consistent.
By, like individually you're talking about?
Correct. Or the town does a CIP to connect the missing pieces. But I think looking on Route 1, you can see the inconsistencies over a 30-year period of
Yeah.
sidewalk, not a sidewalk, 4-foot area, 5-foot, you know,
Yeah.
and being consistent, it will over time connect.
Yeah.
But adding a waiver, so if it's impractical or the town does have a design, but it couldn't be done, maybe is the way to address the fee in lieu that you were talking about.
I'm fine with the board handling that.
Yeah.
I follow the logic there. I guess I was just hoping that we could have less, down the road, have fewer sites that would come back to us with some sort of impracticality, saying, I can't do that because the last time the site was developed, some, you know, the orientation of whatever site elements make that more difficult, utility pole placement, something like that. But if you think that this is covered, and that if the, if contributions to the in lieu fee or the town's, longer term projects to pick away at these connections, if that addresses it, it's harder for me to picture a town project coming forward and making a connection onto a site, right? If the town comes forward with a sidewalk project, that's probably just gonna run along the roadway.
Right, in the right of way. That's what this is about. maybe that's what
Oh.
I'm talking, this is a 4 sidewalks in your right of way. This is your, is that what we're, maybe
I understand
disconnected?
that, but
Okay.
there was some language, let me see if I can find it. Specific to sidewalks, access like on site and connecting to the right of way. And that's sort of what it was.
Oh, okay, sorry, I
Oh, maybe
misunderstood.
That's a different, yeah. I thought you were telling us you didn't want the people to build sidewalks.
No, no,
I was really struggling with that. And I feel better now.
no, just that a connection from a
connection.
site development to the right of way
Gotcha.
should not be precluded. So, we should not requiring that you build it out to nothing, but that you not put something else in the way of a logical connection like that. So if your front door heads out directly towards the right of way and a sidewalk or pedestrian connection wants to be there, but there's no public sidewalk to tie into at this time, that's fine. But don't, preserve the option for that connection down the road. That's all I'm saying.
On the
On the
private
private
property.
property. side.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry if that one.
Okay, yeah.
And then just, lastly, the section 12 on alternative, transportation. There's some references here about, providing amenities along defined routes. So, so like if someone is on a transit route, provisions may consist of bus shelters, or bicycle racks. And, this is another one where I just don't want us to limit ourselves. So transit routes change. We don't have defined bicycle routes to my knowledge. But I don't think that like any route can be a bicycle route. You can ride a bike on any public way. So, I think maybe just a little, tweaking of that language would be good. We don't have, what I would consider robust transit at this point, but, there's a lot of pieces, good pieces towards that we do have. And so, sort of along the same lines, like if a particular development is in an area that would be favorable for future transit based on, its density or potential density, that could be a great location for a bus stop. It wouldn't make sense to install a bus shelter at this time, but again, not to cite anything so close to the right of way that would be really difficult, down the road. Just leaving the, not being tied to something that's a defined transit or bicycle route at this time, I guess that was my comment on that.
So this is the existing language? And has this
Mhm.
ever come up in any discussions? Because we didn't spend any time with this, so I'm not sure what to do with that.
Yeah, true. I know the bicycle racks comes up on all of our projects.
Right.
Um,
And we put that in the amenities and landscaping.
which that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if it's something for future consideration, that's fine, but I feel like, it's worth being mindful of.
Okay.
Is that something that maybe we should look at more? I know, like you said, right now it's one sentence, right?
I feel like there could be
And
more.
exactly, and I know that's where you're going with it. And is that something you'd want, say, transportation
Yeah,
committee to
sure,
kind of
we could
look
take- we
into
could
or
look at that.
weigh into? And it could be a future amendment.
What about if we add it to a recommendation for our townwide transportation plan that we
Yeah.
address this with
Sure.
transportation? Because
Yeah.
long range didn't want to touch it.
Better language. Yeah, fair.
Jen, are you?
All set, yeah.
Okay, thank you. My turn. Well, let me say that I was involved in many or most of the meetings with the long-range planning. And as I went through this, I said, yes, this is what we agreed to. This is what we agreed to. I appreciate the fact that you folks have brought up some stuff that we didn't think about. We started, I think, to see what we thought we were writing and what we wanted to see. So that's kind of the purpose of a public hearing, and hearing from the planning board is those things that have been missed. It's good to bring up, and then we can't necessarily solve them sitting here, but we can point to somebody and say, could you take a look at this and could you figure out how to solve this? And I have no more to say other than I appreciate all the work that was done, and that I missed a lot of stuff, I guess. So thank you very much. Hearing is closed. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for proposed amendments to Chapter 405 zoning ordinance, Section 12 sign regulations to add a maximum sign size waiver process for buildings 20,000 square feet or greater for the town.
Thank you. So this is in the same line of reasoning. The commercial design standards had a provision that, buildings over 20,000 square feet could have bigger signs. We've done that, through the site plan process for larger signs, like the Hannaford's, that sort of building, those are over 20,000 square feet. Our sign ordinance only allows a 100 square foot sign. So this is just to actually codify the waiver process so that if we have a bigger building and they want to come through, they can do it through the planning board.
Thank you. Is there a member of the public that would care to comment upon the sign, the text amendment for the signage? Anybody online?
No one online.
All right, thank you. Public hearing is closed. I turn this over to the board. Comments, please. Let the record show that we loved it. And there are no comments. Next item on the agenda, 4.04, Whistler Landing and Teal Point Condominium Associations are requesting subdivision amendment review for lot line adjustments along the common line between two abutting condominium projects. No construction improvements are proposed. The project is located at 5 Whistler Landing, Assessors Map R074, Lot 12 for the town.
Thank you. This specific subdivision amendment is a very simple subdivision amendment. It is really a cleanup process that is shifting the same amount of land to each condominium development, and we have no comments. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you. For the applicant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Nancy St. Clair with St. Clair Associates. I'm here tonight on behalf of Whistler Landing Condominium and Teal Point Condominium to present to you a proposed land exchange between the two abutting condominium projects. The graphic that's shown on the screen shows the land areas that would be transferred between the two properties. So the blue on the screen is land that would come from Whistler Landing and go to Teal Point, and the red on the screen is land that would come from Teal Point and go into Whistler Landing. The lines that were originally on the plan, the original boundary lines, were phase lines, and they made sense during construction, but they don't necessarily make sense when you're dealing with two abutting property lines. And so tonight, the exercise is to clear up that issue, to make those lines more representative of the appropriate boundaries between the two projects. For example, if you look at the blue area that is on what would be the right side of your screen near the cul-de-sac, that area overlaps the entrance into the Teal Point subdivision. So with that exchange, the entire driveway of Teal Point will be held by Teal Point Condominium Association. Another example is in the red area, sort of in the center of the site. There's a boundary line that comes pretty close to the existing condominium units that are in Whistler Landing. There's a tree line there, there's a lawn area there that most normal people would consider their backyard. But technically was at that point in the ownership of Teal Point. So that land would come in to Whistler Landing so that it makes more logical sense. So as Autumn pointed out, there is no net change in the areas between the two. It's just simply a matter to clean up the property lines and make them make a little more sense.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the room that would care to comment? Anyone online?
No hands up.
Thank you. Public hearing is closed. Let me turn this over to the board. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, and I have none. It seems very simple. I have a draft motion. Whistler Landing and Teal Point Condominium Association Subdivision Amendment Review. I move to approve the amendment to Whistler Landing and Teal Point subdivision proposed by Whistler Landing and Teal Point Condominium Associations as depicted in plan sets prepared by St. Clair Associates dated 7/19/24 with the following findings and conditions. Findings, the amendment involves a land swap between associations in two different areas, approximately 14,345 square feet each. The planning board finds the project meets the requirements of the subdivision and zoning ordinance.
I move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Roger. Doreen? Call the roll, please.
Rick Monking,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Rachel Henriksen,
Yes,
and James Hebert.
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Passes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That just set a record. Next item on the agenda, 4.05 Remedy Investments LLC is requesting site plan review for an Intermed Surgery Center office and urgent care building. The project will be located on the Downs Road on Lot 8 of the Downs Town Center subdivision. Assessors map R052, Lot 4. For the town?
Thank you. This item came before you at our last meeting. And at that meeting, you had some concerns about the specific layout and the interaction with the building in Scarborough Downs Road and the unnamed road. And then there were some questions about parking and landscaping. The applicant has resubmitted, they have resubmitted some layout options to show you how that would look with the in a different way. They've also included a different rendering for the front. They've added 2 pocket park areas along Scarborough Downs Road. And then they've added a masonry wall along the dumpster area. With that, I believe that I will turn it over to the applicant to explain more of their additions and changes.
Thank you. And for the applicant.
Good evening, Drew Gagnon with Coral Palmer representing Remedy Investments LLC. Going to share my screen here. I have a brief presentation for the board, just reviewing the material that was in your application packet. So just to remind the board here, this is the Intermed Health Facility. It's on the corner of Scarborough Downs Road and a to-be-named public right-of-way in Downs Town Center. So this is the general location, and south of the site would be, or south of this plan would be Higas Parkway, and to the left would be Payne Road, just to orient everyone. Focused our resubmission package as well as this presentation on the comments we received from the planning board at the July meeting. So I've highlighted them here. Again, they were discussed in the meeting packet, but I just wanted to briefly go over them. There's a shared parking request from the board to the applicant, and the applicant and master developers of Crossroad Holdings are collaborating on an agreement that will enable shared parking on the site to support the Lot 3 programming once that's known and once that's developed. So they've agreed to some sort of shared parking program for that site. In addition, the dumpster pad location came up. So for programming purposes, the dumpster pad location really needs to be at that plan northeast side of the building. That's where the service area is. That's also where our mechanical room is and where the electrical entry needs to be into the building just from an interior perspective. So located next to that dumpster pad is a generator as well as a transformer. So we're looking at that as a bit of a kind of a one-stop service area. And in order to have truck movements adequately serve the dumpster and leave, as well as service trucks for the generator and transformer location, that's really the ideal spot for it. Again, hearing the comments and the concerns surrounding that area, we've really beefed up the buffer for that. So in addition to the plantings we have in this area, we provided a masonry wall, so it's more than your typical dumpster screening wall, material that matches the building. And John's going to talk about that in a little bit, as long as some renderings we provided in the application that show how that matches and really that we think it works well with the building in an area that we really need to have the dumpster and the generator pad, and trying to work those areas together. The landscaping plan selection. So we updated this with the native species. That was a request last time. So we've eliminated the non-native ones and provided the native species. There's a renewable energy and sustainability statement that we provided in the application package. I'm not going to go through that, but if there's specific questions for that, someone from our team is happy to answer that. And the last, I call it larger planning board comment item, was the building and site engagement with the public street. So when we left the last meeting, we were asked to really review how the building engages with the street. So we did that and looked at all the different ordinance requirements and laid them out in our application materials. And then we also thought, well, it makes sense to show kind of our thought process on how we arrived to the building in this location. So what we did is we dusted off some older concepts that were early on in the design process, cleaned them up a little bit so we could share them with the planning board, and then provided narratives directly on that of why we didn't and why this concept doesn't work for either the applicant or for the town of Scarborough requirements. So again, these were all provided as an attachment in your last application package, but quickly, this is one of the concepts that the front of the building was facing Downs Road. So you can see the overhang in the drop-off area. And again, for numerous reasons, this one doesn't work, but just to highlight a few, the lack of patient and visitor parking spaces in front of the building. I think this concept only provides around 50. Our preferred plan provides up to 70, which is really bare minimum that we need in front of the building to support patients, visitors, just from a sense of getting them to the front door and having adequate parking out front. So that's one of the main primary concerns with this concept, as well as the primary traffic. The majority of the traffic, well, all the traffic going to the front of the building, but the majority of that traffic is going to be crossing the service area. So from an aesthetic point of view, that's not exactly the spot we want the traffic to be crossing to get into the front of the building, but also we have some concerns in general just with safety and trucks backing in and out and other items like that. So that's just not a preferred orientation and site circulation safety pattern that we're looking for. The total number of parking spaces for this concept, somewhere around, I think, 225. That doesn't meet the town of Scarborough requirements or the applicant's building requirements for 5 per 1,000. So that just it wouldn't simply fit on this site, and it's not as efficient as the concept that we have. And then in general, the majority of the staff and overflow parking is extremely far from the front door. So it creates a confusing condition for employees as well as overflow parking visitors to get to the front door, which is located at the bottom. You'd have to cross either the service area or go around to the right of way. It just doesn't really make sense. And it's a long distance for asking visitors and patients that can't fit in the small amount of front parking space we have to walk all the way around the building. In addition, the second concept that we provided, again, we looked at this early on and decided this wasn't the right programming and site development for this project. Essentially, it kind of flips our front building so that the front building faces the unnamed road versus it was facing the access drive in the concept, in our submission package. So essentially I flipped it 180 about this page right here. So again, very similar reasons and issues with this. That's why it wasn't preferred. General limited parking in front of the building for the primary drop-off. This provides, I think, almost 30 spaces directly in front of the building. And again, 70 was really the bare minimum we should be doing on the site, given the use. So that doesn't really meet the needs of the applicant. This building doesn't engage well with the prominent corner of the unnamed street and Scarborough Downs Road. We're providing parking in a drop-off area directly in front of the area that's going to be facing the town center, which we didn't feel was appropriate, and nor does it engage with the street. The majority of the traffic, again, is going to be funneled through the service area, which we didn't want to do, as well as the total parking on site is significantly limited compared to the other plan. This doesn't provide the 5 per 1,000 required for the applicant in this use. And one last thing, limited queuing on site. So I showed some small vehicles on this that show that drop off and pickup is. Obviously, we want them to drop off on the passenger side of the vehicle. That would create some safety and circulation issues with them backing up into the main drive aisle there. The other plan, if you flip it, you had plenty of stacking available along entrances for drop off and pickup for the site. So that was one of the primary safety concerns on this concept here. So in summary, we had reviewed these concepts early on, and we decided that this really wasn't what we were looking at here now on this plan is the ideal layout for the site's the most efficient, and it doesn't create any kind of urban or development sprawl, and it fit within the approved property lines that the parties have agreed to. And it also meets all the town of Scarborough's ordinance requirements. Understanding there was still a concern with how the building engaged with the right-of-way, we've added 4 placemaking elements to this. There's 2 along Scarborough Downs Road, and there's 2 along the unnamed access road, kind of at where it makes sense along the building corners. Those are paved areas, placemaking, there's gonna be benches, and what we feel is that activates the street frontage a little bit better than we had previously proposed. It'll draw pedestrians closer to the building, and it'll kind of engage the street and engage the building frontage with the street. Next, I'm gonna ask John Boyd from E4H to come up here, and he's gonna discuss a little bit more about the internal building programming and the renderings that are provided in the application.
Thank you, Drew. Thanks. John Boyd with E4H Architects. Thank you for having us back and reevaluating our proposal. So to tie into what Drew was talking about with there's a lot going on in this building on a tight site, and we realized after our last discussion with you that we didn't necessarily make that fully aware to everybody on the group. So some of the things that we can see in this floor plan, the front half of the building facing the Downs Road is the ambulatory surgery. So the very front edge of the building consists of 23 pre and post-op surgical bays. The project is designed for 2 initial ORs plus 2 endoscopy rooms with a future planning for an additional 2 operating rooms. So one of the other requirements for the ambulatory surgery is to have a patient discharge. So we've got the front door, which is towards the back third of the building, and then we've got the patient discharge. So the site configuration allows for queuing of vehicles with the patients along that sidewalk for both discharge and pickup. The back third of the building is taken up with the imaging department. So we have X-ray, CT scanner, ultrasound, mammography, bone density scanning, and an MRI machine, which is really in that upper left corner of the plan for a variety of reasons, one of which is for safety and when the magnet fails or when the magnet needs to be replaced, you need a way to get it in and out of the building. So also the things that are happening at the back, EMS pickup, patient access to future mobile imaging, depending on what that might be. It might be a mobile PET scanner. That truck would be, I'm sure you've seen those before, that truck would arrive and sit there for a few days come and go, maybe once a week, maybe twice a month, something like that. And then receiving, loading, trash, recycling at the back, plus the vendor entrance for healthcare equipment vendors who work on a pretty integrated basis with the staff, especially in the surgical department. Staff entrance at that back stair, and a movement of clean supplies, clean linens into the building from the back. And we've provided these pathways so that they can come in safely and securely and then enter the departments for loading of new materials. Upstairs, we have the front 3/4 of the building is the medical office building. We've got several specialty practices up there, ear, nose, and throat, pediatrics, OBGYN. There's, I think, 53 exam rooms. And then at the very front of the building facing the road are the combined staff work areas for the nurses, PAs, and physicians. Like to give them a lot of windows up front so that they get a lot of natural light. The back part of the building is the urgent care. So urgent care patients will come in the main lobby downstairs, go up the elevator, and then be directed into the back corner where the urgent care exam rooms are. We've got 6 urgent care exam rooms back there. So that's kind of the zoning within the building that sort of helps understand and inform the thought processes that we went through with siting the building on the site. And then this is just a diagram of the site plan that has those ground floor components, access points defined around the perimeter of the building. One of the things, as was mentioned before, I love the term pocket park. I don't know if I'd be so bold as to call this a pocket park, but we've engaged these nice little places where we've got some specialty paving, benches. We could have specialty lighting there perhaps, but a way for the front of the building to engage with the street front and align with future civic buildings, which are going to be down the road a little ways. We were very careful and intentional with the massing of this building and the use of materials. The thought process is here that identifying this corner that's forefront in front of us with a little bit of a raised hat and separate materials, which then wrap and pull the eye around to the building to the main entrance, which is down along the left side. And the other view, which is back by the loading dock, trash enclosure, and generator, we used materials that are the same materials on the building. So we're not attached to the building. This isn't an attempt to say that there's a wing coming off the building, but we're using those same materials to tie into the look and feel of the building. And then with the angle, there's also a couple of seating areas along this side as well that will be facing the future outdoor area across the street. Any questions or comments?
First, we will have the public hearing, and then I'm sure the board has got some comments. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment? If there is, please approach the podium. Give your name, address. You have 3 minutes for the comment. If you are online and would like to make a comment, please utilize the raise your hand feature.
No one online.
And no one moving in the room. The public hearing is over. I will turn this over to the board. Let's start down at this end with Rick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, folks, on taking our comments from the last meeting, and I am satisfied at the engagement that this building now has with the street, the placemaking areas that you've provided, and the landscape appear like it envisions what I kind of was thinking about as engaging of the road. Now, the unnamed road at this time and that wall and everything, I think that adds to the aesthetics of the building. I understand it's got to have these kind of services, the emergency generator and the trash. And I think it's a nice way in which you can utilize that more um, uh, operations type services for maintenance and operation. I'm glad to hear that there's a possibility of some shared parking down the road when the next lot comes before us. It'll be certainly on my mind as that plan comes before us, but I appreciate the willingness to have that engaged conversation. At this point, Madam Chair, I think the waivers are totally acceptable. Maybe it'll be the last time we have to have a waiver for the 24-foot. But glad to see it once again. I think in my terms, I appreciate the attempt to go all electric with this, minimizing the fossil fuels for the heating and cooling system. So for that, it'd be great to have it built with solar on it. There's lots of reasons why the Downs needs to have some sort of way in which they can generate some power there to minimize cost of bringing it in from the grid. So certainly keep that. There's lots of tax credits available now to move that forward. So I would strongly recommend you do it while you've got all the labor there. So at this point, Madam Chair, I'm convinced that they have worked really hard in trying to meet our ordinances, and I have no further comments.
Thank you. Jen?
I was not here for the last conversation, so cognizant of that, I'll try to be brief in the event that you've already chatted about any of these, but I'm curious if this facility is this replacing anything like this in this area? Is it a straight addition to? And if it's not an intermed replacement, is there another facility near to us here that even from a different provider that you could potentially point to and say, these are similar type services that are being offered somewhere else?
Mean Health has a Scarborough Surgery Center, which offers ambulatory surgery. I don't believe it has any of the other services that are in this building: imaging, urgent care, MOB. The current ambulatory surgery center for Intermed is on Marginal Way,
Okay.
across from Trader Joe's.
Yep.
So that the surgery center will be moving to this location. They have a facility at Road. Some of the practices for there will be moving into this new facility. So they're sort of relocating and consolidating in this location.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure that this was talked about last time, but just briefly, I'm just curious what the emergency routing to and from this facility would be ideally. I know we've had a lot of conversations on the board about traffic calming and pedestrian scale through the Downs Town Center. And, that's not to say that an ambulance would never go through there, but certainly this type of use feels like it would contribute significantly to that. So I'm just curious, will there be a directive for ambulances coming and going, or even large, it doesn't have to be emergency, but larger vehicles to use Payne Road predominantly, Haggis Parkway predominantly, or just how are they getting here in an overall sense?
Yeah, and it's a good question. The emergency use is simply that, it's just as an emergency use for patients to leave the hospital to go somewhere else. But in terms of like our truck movement plan, and this includes the mobile imaging truck that could come in, which would be like a WB67 style truck, so a larger truck. It would be turning around interior to the site, and it would leave primarily through Downs Road. That's been the design for that. and the design location for trucks to come down from Payne Road into the site. So it wouldn't be going through the town center, and that's in coordination with our conditions of approval for that subdivision at the
Okay.
same time.
Would you mind putting back up the, you love to do this to us, Drew, where you come to the presentation with map, but not in our packet. The
I will note
overall,
that.
the context, I'm sorry, I don't mean, that's not nice. You do a lot of good work. It's a lot, I know. The contextual map of this location, with the other bigger, yeah, that one. Okay, so the town center that we've previously talked about is sort of down there. Yep, okay.
Yep. This would be the first phase, and this is the second phase that was just recently approved on
Okay,
the roadway.
great, thanks.
Mhm.
It's hard to keep up in a good way. I mean that in a good way. Okay. Great. I love the idea of shared parking, although I'm really curious how that's going to pan out if the hours for this facility are 8 to 8 is what I read your response was. And I get the sense that maybe it's not the same intensity from 8 to 8.
Correct.
But, you know, presumably you wouldn't be able or want to turn that over fully until 8 o'clock. So I'm just curious how that will work out. I think it's definitely a great start to that conversation. So happy to follow along as you work through that. And then I guess my last question is maybe partly for the applicant, but maybe partly for staff too. I did go back and read through some of the standards for this district that, you know, refers pretty heavily to mixed use. And I guess I'm curious, well, I'm curious from the applicant's side of things, how you would interpret this fitting into a mixed use environment. And then also from the staff, same question, like from the staff point of view, is that when we say mixed use in this, you know, in the town center, are we talking about a mix of uses parcel to parcel, or are we encouraging or wanting mixed uses within a site itself?
I think it's really pretty vague, and that it's a mixture of uses in
general?
in general.
Okay,
Yeah. But mixed use in a building is encouraged.
sure, okay. Great,
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if you look at it holistically, at the same time, this is a really well done mixed use of health facilities, right? Like we've got the urgent care, the medical office building, the surgery, all those different uses, which you don't necessarily usually get in just one building. So I'd look at it that way too.
okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Thank you. Roger?
Thank you. I actually thought the building and everything looked pretty good the first time around, and I think it looks even better now, so congratulations. And while you have that on the screen there too, I think it's worth noting that there's conceptually a road gonna go right where it says Town Center District.
Somewhere in there,
Excuse me, from Market Street up to,
correct.
so that'll be another way of getting in there a little more conveniently for some people. Just on the staff comments, there's a mention about the placemaking, and several of the benches and placemaking areas are shown in the right of way. Has that been resolved?
I think looking at it, and I'm just looking at dimensions and also looking at the rendering, I think there's potential to get that on the private property and still kind of interface with the sidewalk. I think Public Works had some issues with being able to get by or maintain if you have kind of benches kind of in the right of way. We've had issues in other places where it's just kind of, obviously it's a dense development. But looking at it, it appears that you have 8 feet from the right of way to the building, as well as on the side on Name Street, you have 7 feet. And so I would think there's potential. And so we would be asking for that probably as the condition compliance, is that they could kind of make that kind of fit.
Yeah, we're happy to work with staff on getting that to fit in, making sure, winter operations and such like that. So, yeah.
Okay, well said. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my only question or caution for the board proceeding without a concrete plan for possible additional parking. Just in the duration that I've been on the board, parking has been a significant concern here. We've seen parking waivers for nearby projects and adjacent buildings, and I'm thinking if this is going to be a proposed downtown as proposed by the developer, I'd like to see something a little bit more concrete than let's wait until later to see what happens. Because I'm concerned that once this moves on, that we won't be able to have an opportunity to revisit this in the future. And I guess, Drew, if you can answer this for me, if this parking lot is going to be, or if parking in general in support of the undeveloped Lot 3 is going to be discussed at a later date regarding the undeveloped Lot 3, will the planning board have input that we could come back and say, yes, we would like you to open up your parking lot intermed to some limited hours to be used by the public?
I can speak to, I know there's an agreement in place between Crossroads and Remedy in terms of a shared parking. I'm not sure about number of parking spaces, but typically when you're doing a shared parking calculation, you really need to know the use of what's going into the adjacent Lot 3. So I think leaving it vague is not something we're just, we're looking to only have 2 or 100, whatever the number is, right? It just needs to go with what the uses that are planned on Lot 3 as well as peak times, right? Because it depends on the type of use. Not only is it the generation of the spaces, but the time from, an afternoon to an evening shared parking scenario, that number is different than, a 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. parking number. So I think it wasn't intended to just have it as a blanket statement. It was more of, we just don't know what that number is yet and what makes sense for the development next door. So that was really the intent, is that when Lot 3 comes forward, that number would be defined, I think, for both the developers so that, that could kind of be finalized.
Okay. Do we have an idea on when to expect a submission on Lot 3?
I would think it'd be, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Bacon, who might have.
I'm just wondering, are we looking at like later this year? Are we looking at next year? I know based on the, I think there's a New England real estate article that was published, you folks hired, and I don't mean to distract from this application. I know this is slightly different, but I think everything in this area is conjoined together, and it all sort of feeds one another as far as the flow and service to the public. Go ahead, Dan.
Sure, yeah. We're actively looking at this site as well as the site across the street. I can't say whether a site plan is gonna be submitted this year or next year. But we're gonna have actually a workshop. We've been talking with Autumn about a workshop on the 16th, so right before your next meeting, to kind of give you a broader update on design plans and intentions for town center. So I think we can talk in more detail about this lot at that meeting, and kind of short-term plans for it and longer-term plans. To Drew's point about shared parking, we're working hand in hand with Remedy so that there's an opportunity for shared parking. And it will definitely be part of the site plan review process for that lot, because we also don't want to build more parking than necessary, and we want to capitalize on unused parking, which could be evenings, could be weekends. We're just not there yet in terms of granularity to say it's 50 spaces or 60 spaces or 100. So, but you'll know as soon as we know in terms of a plan review. And I think the 16th is a good kind of workshop type format to talk more high level in terms of timing and next steps.
Cool. Thank you, Dan. I look forward to that as well. And I know it'll be a chance for us to talk further about it. Again, I'm just thinking back to one common discussion that we've discussed previously is using Costco as an example, as not potentially missed opportunity for us to be able to do more in this space before that ship kind of sails. My last comment here is the place-making spaces. That's also you're referring to as the pocket park as well. Is that correct? I guess what I would like to see is the inclusion of pedestrian level walkway lighting and more benches along Scarborough Downs Road and the unnamed road as well. Again, this is going to be a high traffic pedestrian area. I've said many times before, a lot of people are using these trails and walking systems here on the Downs. So to provide more of those, I think it's a low cost item that we can include here. That could be easily done and accommodated. Lastly, with regard to parking, I just see this as with the entire lot here, 25% of it is building and 75% of it is asphalt parking lots. So I'd like to see, from my perspective, looking at this top down, again, as an electrical engineer, not a civil engineer, I just see that as a lot of hard top space that would love to see some kind of shared use. And those are my comments that I'll leave with the board. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In general, I would echo some of my colleagues' comments that we appreciate the idea for the shared parking and recognize that it's difficult to give an exact number without knowing what's next door, but the fact that that's at least in the works is something that I do appreciate. I think in general, we've done a pretty good job on this site, and it looks like the peer reviews are pretty well satisfied. So really at that point, I don't have any further comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have, Drew, if you could take a look at the staff notes, the site plan staff comments. On the second page, there are a couple of things there. They talk about snow storage. And note 5 includes temporary snow storage to be used if other spaces is occupied. This note must be updated to include that removal is required within 24 hours. Is that all of that?
All set.
Any questions about any of them or is it difficulties that you have?
Regarding any planning board or any planning staff comments?
Correct.
No, we're all set with those.
All right, very good. I do not have a problem with the waivers. I appreciate the effort that you've taken to link the building to the street. I do agree that perhaps some low-level pedestrian lighting along there near the benches would be appropriate because it's going to be right close to the town center. There might be a lot of activity there. Folks might want to just stop on their way to walk to one of the condos. I do have a question, though I want to take a look at the brick wall that hides the dumpster and the utility, the transformers. This to me is a kind of an opportunity to do something a little bit original, perhaps. And to take a look at get some alternatives, let's say, additional plantings along that wall. To truly, in a sense, break it up, the plantings should be, I suspect, should be higher, and it might be putting some trellises that plants can climb up on would be very good in that area. And also, this is entirely voluntary. The landscaping part isn't, but this part is entirely voluntary. We really don't have any space in all of the Downs for public art. And as I look at these walls, there's a place here for some public art, for people walking along there as they're leaving the town center. As they're walking along what I laughingly call Voldemort Lane, because it's yet to be named. I think that's an opportunity that I would love to see you take advantage of. It is, again, solely at your discretion. But must be something there, whether it's the trellises or you take an opportunity to create something right there. That would be great. I think we might want to start to really address the issue throughout the Downs is the opportunity for public art. It's a very important cultural draw for people. One of the questions I had in terms of the drop off, excuse me, the pickup site. And I'm not sure, could you show on there? There we go. Yep, thank you. The pickup site, how many cars do you have stacked up there, queued to pick up patients?
On this plan?
Yeah,
Maybe
on the plan that we've got, that was
the alternative or our proposed plan?
your proposed.
On this site, I would have to probably estimate somewhere 10 to 12 looping around the parking lot. The idea with the alternative, why I showed that was it was blocking a drive on it. So this would certainly block some spaces, but
Yeah, and that's where I was going, because with this plan, you are blocking the queuing for the pickup, you are blocking spaces.
correct.
And if you have ample spaces, which you do seem to do, you have the opportunity there to cut off a couple of those spaces and instead add to the landscaping there, so that if somebody comes out to get into their car and leave, they're not sitting there waiting for someone else to come out in a wheelchair to be loaded into a car. In other words, there's a problem with the queuing. I think this site, that queuing leads to the sort of congestion that we see at Starbucks when too many people are lined up and people can't pull their cars out to leave. So I'd like to see some of the sites, some of the parking slots removed. Or alternatively, show me how you can, through what you've done before, through data that you have, that you only need spaces for 3 cars to queue, or 4 cars, whatever it is.
Understood. I think an option too would be flipping the drive aisle and the parking spaces there so that when they're queued on the bottom of the drive aisle, you actually would have room to turn the vehicles out on the top. I think would be an alternative as well.
I'm not sure I'm clear on that.
So because you're going to be queuing along the bottom side of the drive aisle, right? Because you're going to
Correct.
drop off. So if I flipped the spaces in the drive aisle so that the drive aisle was further south and the spaces were on the north of the drive aisle there, that's running east-west on the plan, there would still be a little bit of room to pull out and leave rather than blocking immediately adjacent to the cars. Either way, I can look at that for you if you're not following me there.
Yeah, no, I'm not. That's why I was looking at Jen. Or Autumn.
Okay, that's
Oh, good.
probably describing it wrong, but I understand the comment and we'll take a look at
Okay,
it.
and to me, perhaps the best remedy is to remove those slots and replace them with some good landscaping. That creates even more of a visual connection to the street, to me.
Understood.
And that's all I have. I do believe that you have taken our comments to heart. You have created the context, the connection to the street. I wasn't clear that you were going to be able to do that, but I think you did, and I think you did it in a imaginative way that's going to be a benefit to the folks who are walking past and to the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a draft motion. Downtown Center, Lot 8, Intermed site plan review. I move to approve the project titled Intermed Medical Facility proposed by Remedy Investments LLC as depicted in plan sets provided Goral Palmer dated 7/29/24 with the following findings and conditions. Findings. The planning board has reviewed the application and supporting documentation and finds that the proposed design of the site plan adequately addresses the site plan review and zoning ordinance with the following waivers and conditions. Waivers, site plan review ordinances, section 4D2, to reduce the minimum drive aisle from 25 to 24 feet for perpendicular parking space areas. 2, site plan review ordinance, section 4D5A, to separate the parking area from the building by a 5-foot landscape area. Landscape area is proposed on the northern and eastern side of the building. Conditions. Prior to the start of construction, the applicant shall schedule a pre-construction meeting. The meeting shall include appropriate town staff, the developer, and their site contractor, and is to be coordinated through the planning department. The below must be addressed prior to the scheduling of the pre-construction meeting. A, address staff comments dated 8/19/24. B, address comments in the Haley Ward memo dated 8/6/24. C, address comments in the Traffic Solutions memo dated 8/2/24. D, address planning board comments discussed at the 8/19/24 meeting. This includes 1, add metal trellises and climbing landscape or to the masonry dumpster enclosures along the public right-of-way or an installation of public art. 2, remove 3 parking spaces along the Scarborough Downs Drive frontage adjacent to the pickup location, replace with additional landscaping and seating. 3, add pedestrian lighting with the seating areas along Scarborough Downs and the unnamed road. E, the applicant shall execute and record a stormwater maintenance agreement with the town. The form of the stormwater maintenance agreement is located in Appendix 1 of the Town of Scarborough's Chapter 419 Post-Construction Stormwater Infrastructure Management Ordinance. F, payment of the Chapter 419 Stormwater Maintenance Agreement and Reporting Fee, total $750. G, provide the final full plan set to the planning department. This shall include all site and civil plans, landscape plans, lighting plans, and architectural renderings and elevations. H, payment of all review fees and invoices. This shall be reviewed by the planning department. 2, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall A, pay impact fees totaling $119,600. Higus at Route 1, $49,500. Dunstan Corner, $70,100. 3, prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall A, submit evidence in the form of a letter or plan prepared and stamped by a professional engineer who either prepared the post-construction stormwater management plan and its associated facilities or supervised the plan and facilities construction and implementation. The letter or plan shall certify that the stormwater management facilities have been installed in accordance with the approved post-construction stormwater management plan and that they will function as intended by said plan. B, request an inspection by the planning department to ensure compliance with this planning board approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Beely. Doreen, please call the roll.
Rick King,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Rachel Henriksen,
Yes,
and James Hebert.
Yes.
that's unanimous. Welcome to Scarborough.
Thank you.
We usually take a 5-minute break around 8:30. I am not sure we will get through Dirigo credit union. We may, but I'm just not sure. So by 8:30. So let's take a 5-minute break now, 5 minutes from whatever that clock says. Thank you. We are back in session. Next item on the agenda, item 4.06, Sterigo Credit Union is requesting site plan review for the renovation and expansion of an existing building. Other improvements include a drive-through with 2 lanes added in front of the building, and the parking lot will be updated and expanded. The project is located at 424 Payne Road, Assessors Map R038, Lot 11. Autumn?
Thank you. This site came before you all for a sketch plan, and since that time, they have addressed some of our concerns. We have minimal staff comments outstanding, but we do have some stormwater issues to address through town engineer and the public works director. We have all met on staff to try to figure out what the existing site is doing. I think that for the specific site concerns, we are in pretty good shape. There's some minor comments and some tweaks to be made to the site plan. But other than that, I'll let the applicant present and answer any questions for you all.
Thank you. And for the applicant?
Good evening, Andy Morrell, civil engineer from BH2M. As Autumn said, yeah, I think we've, kind of whittled the comments down. This layout hasn't changed significantly since you guys had seen this at a sketch plan. I think the only real substantive change we made was to reverse the direction of the drive-through lane. That's really all that's changed to the layout since you guys saw it at sketch plan. We have been working with staff to try to work through some of these issues. I know there's a couple issues in the comments that I want to address. Let's just let you guys know how we're planning to address those. There was some discussion about a right turn lane that I understand the town is looking to add at the Gorham Road and Payne Road intersection. That would involve some work on this parcel. We have been given the plans for that, those improvements. The applicant's more than happy to give the town an easement for that work on the property. So moving forward, we'll be sure to show that on the plan for you guys. As Autumn mentioned, this stormwater is really the outstanding issue on this project. This is a pretty complicated site from a stormwater perspective in that what's out there is kind of a mystery. And we've been trying to solve a puzzle of what's out there and what's not out there and what's functioning and what's not functioning. What we have done since we were before you guys is to find out a lot about the existing system that's out there. I think we've all kind of agreed that the stormwater, the way we're managing it on site is getting to a point where we're ready to move forward. The question now becomes, where is the stormwater from the site heading? And I think we have a handle on that, but we don't 100% know for sure where it's going, and more importantly, what the condition of the infrastructure is and who's responsible for the infrastructure, whether it be a town responsibility or the applicant's responsibility. So the way where we are currently is Public Works has agreed to go out to so there's a existing catch basin in front of the front parking lot along Payne Road. That catch basin discharges to the ditch along Payne Road down in front of the House of Lights. We've done some dye testing to determine that that's where it discharges, but the outlet of that pipe has been buried and we can't find it. So Public Works has agreed to go out and try to locate the outlet of that pipe. Once that's been done, we are going to have that line cameraed to see the condition of it and to confirm that that's in fact where it's going. Why is that important? That's important because the pond on site is now going to be discharging to that location. So we want to make sure we're not exceeding any downstream capacity of the storm drain system. So that's kind of where we are with the stormwater. I think we're moving forward. We've made some good progress on this. There's certainly some work to be done on that, but I think we're in a real good spot. The only other issue I think was Fire Chief had some concerns on access and turning around on the site. The intent is to come into the first parking area and then for the fire apparatus to drive through the drive-through lane, go through the bypass lane, and then out the other entrance. We had proposed that drive-through where it's one car wide, is 12 feet wide. Fire department had some concerns on the width of that and whether they could access it, asked us to consider a 16-foot wide location. Trying to find a balance between creating impervious area and creating safe access. We're trying to look into some alternative approaches. What we'd like to do is to widen the radius up as you enter into the drive turn. We currently have it as a 40-foot wide radius. I'd like to fatten that up to 45 feet, provide 2 to 3 more feet of width along that access road as you turn into the drive-through lane. I would also like to cut short the, between the bypass lane and the drive-through, there's a raised curb. I'd like to cut that curb short to, again, allow additional access for the fire truck to get through there. I think with those two changes, that makes a significant difference in access and certainly would, moving forward, would certainly show that on a plan and provide a turning radius to the fire chief to show that. But in my eyes, those are the kind of the issues remaining on the project. Madam Chairwoman, I'll throw it back to you and happy to answer any questions the board has.
This is an item that is subject to public comment. Is there any member of the public in the room that would like to comment? Anyone online? No one online? All right. Public hearing is closed. I will turn this over to the board in no particular order. Who'd like to go first? James?
Thank you, Madam Chair. More of a general question, and maybe this is a better question for town or whoever wants to answer first. You're speaking of a right-hand turn lane that was going to be installed. Can you, sir, describe that, where that's going to be?
Yeah, it's at the intersection of Payne and Gorham Road.
Okay.
And I guess I can describe a little bit, but we have looked at this Payne Road corridor a lot, and I've seen or followed our traffic impact fees going through council and all those things. So we have a lot of master planning going on in this corridor, and that actually what we're looking for is some pedestrian accommodations to be able to get, as we update traffic signals, actually be able to get crossings. And so as you can see right now, there is a wall there. And so it's really about probably having to maybe reconstruct part of that wall if we ever did get to that point where we have the funds to do that project. And we move kind of forward with some sidewalk improvements, probably in that corner. I know DOT did add another lane sometime in the recent decades, I don't know. That's why the right-of-way line looks a little odd there on the Gorham Road approach around that wall. So I think we're trying to work with the capacity in the road, so I don't see it as being substantial easement needed. It's more about trying to fit some of our probably bike ped accommodations through there.
Would that bike, so if you're coming from Gorham Road, because there is a right turn lane there now, coming
right.
from Gorham onto Payne Road, you're looking to potentially have an easement for sidewalk or some sort of pedestrian, or you're thinking like a bike lane in the road, like additional 3 feet?
I'm thinking what we have right now is a concept plan that shows a pedestrian refuge kind of at that corner, right? A landing so that they can cross through a crosswalk on either direction to across Payne or Gorham Road.
Gotcha.
And then continuing sidewalk down. I think it might have some bike lane accommodations, but really just looking at the Payne Road corridor, I don't know if we have the right of way to go up Gorham Road towards
Yeah.
the turnpike. So that's not part of
Okay.
what the concept plan shows.
Great. I guess that was more of my concern, and while I am a champion for trying to get sidewalks everywhere in this town, I would just maybe just a note for town to make sure that Cause I know there's some pretty large trees right there at that corner. That's pretty signature to that corner.
Yep.
So we want to make sure, I guess, those stay as best as we can.
We did walk it and there's quite a few large dead trees as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm looking at Google Maps right now, Google Earth, and I mean, there is a tree there in the corner that is alive. I mean,
Yep.
anything dead that can certainly be
I
taken
will
away.
say that that image is quite different from the existing.
Yeah.
image.
Current.
It's changed in about 8 months, I'd say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dead and, yeah, because I will say they requested a cleanup and I said, no, there's a lot of great plants out there. And then I felt really bad for that because in that time frame, it's really gone down.
Wow, it's really concerning. Oh,
There's
no.
a lot of dead plants.
Yeah, I mean,
I can say that the improvements that are on the, concept plan, very minimally go into the property. I think we're talking like 4 or 5 feet,
sure,
into the property. So
Okay.
I don't think we're talking a substantive easement here.
sure. I mean, if the tree is dead, then the tree is dead. So, yeah, that's very unfortunate. We're losing a lot of these tall trees, but separate from this, separate from everywhere else. So I guess something to keep in mind. Otherwise, I don't really have a concern with what you folks are trying to propose here. I think this is a great use of an existing site and facility and minor tweaks to the flow on the site that you guys are accommodating. Just adds better positivity to the area. So thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Who's next? Roger?
Yes, can you clarify something for me on the access roads?
Yes.
I got some other spaces here I'm holding. You're gonna have a two-way access point, both roads. Now, when they, on the one closest to Payne, once they get past the parking lot, is that gonna be just one way?
Are you talking the second entrance?
I'm talking the one closest to Payne Road. In other words, there's a parking lot right there. You go in.
Yep.
and There's a parking lot right there. Cars can leave that parking lot and
Yep.
go up onto Wood Drive.
Correct.
But once you get past the parking lot where the digit 12 is that gonna be just one way? Cause that's a 12-foot road?
Yeah, the drive-through lane is just one direction. It
Right.
just goes to the back of the site.
Okay,
Correct.
yeah, okay. So in other words, anybody parking in the top lot there, they're not gonna take a left and,
Correct. And we've kind of set that curve up so that it would restrict people from being able to make that turn.
okay, good.
Yep.
All right. That's what I thought what you were gonna do, but I wasn't sure.
Yep.
I just want to talk to you about the renderings, the exterior renderings,
Yes,
if I could.
sure.
When this was before the board, and an applicant before you guys, all right, we had a lot of discussion about Gorham Road. Now, I'm looking on page 16, and I believe that's the Gorham Road. This one here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think that's a good improvement over what's there now. I mean,
I think it's a huge improvement.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty bleak right now.
it is.
Yeah, and so that's good. This is a very interesting building because are you just gonna build over what's there now, or are you gonna tear stuff apart?
Taylor?
Yeah, hi everyone. So Taylor Foley, I'm a project manager for the Element Group. We're the owner's rep on this project. We're gonna be taking the whole portion of the building apart where the credit union would sit. That's all gonna get demoed and built up as new.
Okay,
And then we'll go in and reinforce all the framing to meet existing standards and all that. So we're kind of updating the whole building, but just demoing that part right there. that's
well,
on
I
the
think
screen.
it's gonna be a very interesting building for this corner because it's
Yeah.
a very noticeable corner.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is the sign.
Mhm.
I'm looking at the sign, this page here.
Yeah.
Now, we had a discussion earlier. I brought it up when we're discussing all these ordinances and et cetera. Is this sign gonna be lit interior, internal, white?
I
Is that-
believe that's the intention. Yeah.
Can you do anything other than that?
Yeah. What would you prefer?
Well, go see Aroma Joe's.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Or I did notice on some of your renderings that you do have different, you do have, Dirigo, is it Dirigo or Durago?
Yeah, Dirigo. Yep.
Dirigo, okay, you do have it in white, like right through the drive, right by the drive-through.
Yeah, so each of those building signs will be channel lit and backlit, so the numbers, or the letters in this case,
Yeah.
will shine outwards as well as have some backlighting to them.
I gotta tell you, if you ride along Route 1 and you come from Saco,
Mhm.
where there's bright lights everywhere, and you drive into Scarborough, it's noticeable when you see the signs that have a dark internal,
Mhm.
and just the lettering. I mean, it's so, I think it's so much more pleasing
Yeah.
to the eye, and that's such a prominent location that I think if you could do something with that sign,
Absolutely.
that would make it look better.
Yeah, we can definitely, I'll talk to the sign designer about that.
So is it your plan to remove the current sign that says Roundwood?
Yeah, we'd want to go to each of the Roundwood businesses and get their like obvious like interest in the sign and make sure that that stays. Cause I think we're trying to figure out who actually owns that sign.
Okay. Isn't there an association there?
Yeah, Roundwood is its own
Yeah.
separate subdivision though. Yep. Separate from this property.
Oh, from this property?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Very
So, and this
strangely so.
is on your property?
Yeah, yeah,
So I'd say you own it then.
yeah, that's what I think.
Possession is 19 of the law.
Okay. So, I think that's all I have at this moment. And the other big issue we had was the stormwater, like you're obviously aware of, I think we called it sheeting or something. It was, remember that? It was sheeting across the
Yeah.
Roundwood Drive or something like that. And the other big thing was the pond and the landscaping and the existing, whatever's growing there.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, there's a lot of invasive vegetation that has grown up on that site and,
Right, yeah.
certainly our intent is to cut all that down and start over, as you can see on our
Yeah,
landscaping
well,
plan, so.
yeah, that's great. I think it's gonna be a good project.
It's gonna be a huge improvement to that
Yeah,
corner. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And that sign, I'd get a lot of rent for that sign if that's what you're gonna do too.
Great.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else? Ben?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of my items have been covered already, but one thing that I wanted to ask you about, Haley Ward believes that greater than an acre will be disturbed, and you guys are saying that less than an acre will be disturbed, which makes a difference between what needs to be permitted.
Yep.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so they've made the assumption of, the intent of this project, as you know, is there's an existing parking lot there with an existing entrance on both sides. Our intent is to keep and maintain the majority of each of those existing entrances as you come in. I've shown them to be repaved on our plan with that hatch. That doesn't necessarily mean we're planning to disturb that area other than just pave it. So there's a good portion that they're calculating in that area that's just repaving. That isn't technically a disturbance.
I guess I would maybe ask the board then, who is the relevant authority to determine whether repaving is a disturbance, or is there a specific, or town staff? I guess I just want to make sure that we're not going ahead with something we need a permit. That sounds reasonable to me, but I don't know that I know the definition.
Yeah, I don't know that I know either, so I'm going to look at Angela.
So my understanding, and it was something that staff asked Haley Ward to kind of look at because you are getting really close, very close. And so as we talked about doing things like you were talking about, expanding the radius
Mhm.
or different places like that, you start nibbling away at that very small margin you have left. And then also not knowing how far downstream you might have to go. So if you're right on that cusp and you're kind of tweaking things, it's possible to very easily go over that line. So I think that's where we had asked, staff had asked just Haley Ward to do their own calculations. So I'd be curious to know, if you're saying that just the repaved areas are not included in yours
Correct.
number?
Yeah.
And so you're still that close? Or what is your number without, what it,
I don't know my exact number off the top of my head. I can certainly get that to you. I think
Yeah.
we were, around.
so my understanding was it wasn't that, it wasn't that large of a gap, so that's why,
Right.
where you're talking about pavement, I wouldn't think that would account for all that we're talking about, if that makes sense. I think we still just need to look at, and maybe
And there's,
staff and the applicant, we can look at that together and see where they're at. I just think if you're at 0.99 or whatever it is, or 0.97, and you start doing things like to accommodate the fire department and doing some widening there or fixing some curves, you're very easily gonna get to 1 acre. So,
conversely, there, there is some,
And,
we're
right, it
expanding
could
that
happen the
parking
other way.
lot. I could
Yeah.
certainly make that slope,
so it might be a
you know.
TBD, right?
Yeah, I feel like there's something that,
Yeah.
there's gonna be a back and forth here, but we're certainly, our intent is to be under that 1 acre of impact and
I
not,
think
not need that permit.
If the board is more
If I could
comfortable, yeah.
just jump in here, I think what Ben's question was, is repaving considered disturbing?
So it depends on what they're doing. If they're just doing a grind and surface, I would say no. We have other applicants in town that have gotten into some of the gravel, and you're redoing a parking lot. We've counted that. So it really depends. I think it depends on how they describe it.
Okay, you got that?
Got it. And that's.
So I'm assuming that
that's
you're
certainly
just
our intent.
scraping and.
Yeah, our intent on those entrances is to grind the pavement up and repave them to make it look good when this thing all gets, finalized. So that would certainly be our.
And as
intent.
long as you're also including the shoulders when you're kind
Yep.
of blending in and all of that. So there's a lot of, when you're this close, it's almost like you get into the weeds where we typically don't. I typically don't have Haley Ward measuring the shoulders and things like that, but if you're gonna be this close, we kind of have to.
So I think if I've got this right, if you do more than grinding and repaving, if you get down into the gravel, you are disturbing. If you are just grinding and repaving, you are not. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a forward way to put it.
Okay.
Again, there's a lot of nuances to that, which we can. kind
But
of
we
work through.
otherwise do not have a real good definition of disturbance when it comes to a rehab, let's say, of a parking lot.
Well, I guess you'd go back to disturbances when, you're disturbing the ground. I think it's the difference is how you're not, we're getting into nuances now. I don't think it's worth even providing that definition necessarily.
Well,
because- yeah.
and my suggestion is, because it can be very important when we are in small, minor differences can make a big difference. Autumn, you might want to think about, is there, or could there be, or should there be definitions of disturbance when it concerns the rehabilitation, let's say, of a parking lot in any of the ordinances? It might be worth taking a look at if we do not have
I think if you.
any
go through
definition.
it would count it. And I think that's what I think what I'm hearing from the board is it might not be necessary to count it. I think if you go straightforward by looking at certain definitions in the ordinance or for DEP, that's why I don't think that was the intent is necessarily when you grind it up. So that's why I don't want to define it too much. And then you're throwing more into that might not be necessary.
In this case, but which is why I suggest that there's a gap in definitions here that we might want to take a look at. In this case, we do not have to take a look at it. Am I correct?
I think staff will take a look at it with the applicant and our peer reviewer and come up with a consensus, I'm sure.
I think is the applicant on board with that approach?
We certainly are, yes.
Okay, thank you. But thank you for the question, Ben. Go ahead.
I had, I guess, one other question regarding the second waiver that was being proposed about the minimum entrance widths.
Yep.
If you are redesigning some of that regarding the fire department's plans, is that still going to be necessary to have that waiver?
So again, our intent on those two existing access roads is to just kind of hold what's there. So that's why the two that are there currently in their current condition don't meet the requirements for width. So we're proposing to just repave those and keep them as they are today and as they've existed. Or I don't know, I don't remember when the site was built, but it was a while ago. So our hope is that we could just keep those access roads as they are and not have to widen them to the 24 feet, again, trying to limit the impervious area out there.
All right, let me interject again because that was part of my question. In the staff memo, the staff indicates the board can either have the applicant request to waive this as an existing condition or require widening of the driveways by the applicant to 26 feet. So my question to the applicant is, are you requesting a waiver of this condition?
Yes, we are requesting a waiver to the existing condition, correct?
All right, thank you very much. That was not explicit, but in terms of approval, it needed to be explicit that you are requesting a waiver.
Glad to clear that up.
Thank you. All right, Ben, off you go.
Oh, actually, think I'm pretty much done. I just, like the design of the building, and I think you guys are, well on your way to a good project. So,
Great, thank you.
that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Who have I missed? Jen?
I don't really have much else to add other than just a question about, so I understand, that there's a draft, motion that includes, essentially just confirmation that we can figure out where that storm drain goes to. And maybe it's not, I just can't help but think like, what if it doesn't, what if you can't figure that out, or it's crushed, or it goes somewhere else weird, or just what's the plan B? And it does make me a little bit uncomfortable to approve without knowing where your stormwater is going. But I guess as I've been listening to you explain that, am I safe in assuming that if any of those things come out of the field investigation, you would be back in front of us with some sort of modification to your stormwater approach?
Yeah, I think from our point of view, our intent is to, let's figure out what the condition of this storm drain is and confirm where it's going. I think we're all pretty confident we know where it's going, but let's make sure we know where it's going. Let's find out the condition of it, and then we can work with Angela to figure out what the condition of that is, what improvements are needed, who's responsible, how we're gonna work this out, and then hopefully we can work out an agreement and we can move on. But I would guess if there needed to be substantive changes, then yes, we would have to come back to the board to work those out.
I hope that none of those are what you find, but.
Yes, we do as well.
And I think how staff is looking at it is trying to get it addressed before a pre-construction meeting or before breaking of ground out there, before the site starts, so that they're not, to your point, halfway through the site work or at the end of the site work and it doesn't connect anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we've had
And not
other,
that I feel that's happening. I mean, we did a site walk with Public Works and Planning Director and myself, and they did dye testing, so we can kind of see that it's either ditch or piping, and it ends up in the Payne Road ditch. So we know it's gonna get there eventually. So worst case scenario, we're replacing that whole system down to that ditch
we
line.
like the town, or we like the project.
I think like
Or
he's saying, it depends, and I think that's where it might get tricky. And so, yes, I could see if we can't come to an agreement, we might be in front of the board saying, here's what we found, and we can't come to a resolution. I find that hard to believe, though. I think we usually come to a resolution. And I think Public Works is pretty fair when it comes to that on what is in their purview or not. I think that the tricky part with the site was that at some point it drained. And it hasn't drained through this system in a very, very, very long time. So now all of a sudden you're gonna, if that system is not working, all of a sudden now we're gonna introduce velocity and flow. It might have been there 10 years ago, but it hasn't been. And so that's troubling. So that's where it's like, okay, is that system? And it's also not clear who owns what part of the system is the more tricky part. It's very clear, like when you get out to Payne Road and the crossing, culvert crossing, things like that is obviously the town's responsibility. And when you get on private property, that's where it's a little less clear, that the town, how much ownership the town has, so.
Yeah, so it looks like you're generally, obviously that berm along Gorham Road is the high side, but as you get kind of down towards the pond and the portion of Roundwood Drive kind of flattens out a little bit, so I'm just always curious about what happens if that, maybe it drains okay at first and then.
Well, and as
or
I
if
think
it's-
Roger
there's
might have
problem.
reminded me too, we were talking about some sheet flow over the roadway, things like that, that came up with the last applicant, and I totally forgot about that. And so we were trying to struggle with how is the water getting out of the pond today?
Mhm.
And even finding additional pipes, it's like, as you go, you find actually more questions,
Yeah.
right? So it could be, we could continue on that path,
Okay,
but.
yeah, so I guess I just bring it up because, it's not ultimately looking out for your development and your site. You don't want to get waiting for your certificate of occupancy only to find that your parking lot's not going to drain.
Mhm.
And then, certainly you're first or last on Roundwood Drive, so anyone else coming in and out of there, would potentially be subject to that sheet flow. So, just curious about that, but,
I think to address that, that's why we're kind of front loading. If things are needed, plans, approval, any of that assessment, it needs to be previous to the pre-construction meeting.
okay,
And we would certainly want it that way as well.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
want to resolve it,
right,
sooner the better.
great. Okay, that was my biggest concern other
Yep.
than, some other good comments here.
All right, thank you. Roger, you have,
Yeah, just.
Some thoughts?
Just a thought, when the previous the previous project was before us, actually, I'm getting mixed up with the home suites or whatever, that long-term, the residential property there.
Yeah.
But have you talked to Pierce Furniture about where this, because sometimes they, neighbors may know where all this drainage goes.
Hmm.
Because as I recall, they were concerned when one of the extended stay hotels were before us for something. And I think they were concerned about drainage and stuff like that, besides traffic. So they may know,
Yeah.
or at least give you, they
Yep.
say, it's in this area here, something like that.
Yep, and that's another reason we want to have this thing cameraed, is to determine, are there other pipes that tie into this pipe? It's a long distance of, this is going underground for quite a distance.
Yeah.
What else is tied into this? Is there potentially something from another site that's tied into this as well? Nobody really knows until we get in there and investigate that.
I think everyone has had an opportunity. I actually, my colleagues have brought up everything that I had on my list. So I'm simply going to move towards a draft motion that we have. The Dirigo Federal Credit Union, 424 Payne Road Site Plan Review. I move to approve the project titled Site Plan Dirigo FCU proposed by Dirigo Federal Credit Union. The project is depicted in plan sets prepared by BH2M dated 7/29/24. The application is approved with the following findings, waivers, and conditions. Findings, the project is for a building addition and fit up of the existing structure at 424 Payne Road, including a bank and 2 additional tenant spaces. The planning board finds the project meets the requirements of the site plan review and zoning ordinances with the following waivers and conditions. Waivers, 1, site plan review ordinance section 4BD to locate a driveway closer than 125 feet from the tangent point of the curb of any intersection. The development entrance on Roundwood Drive will remain in its current location, 80 feet from the intersection of Payne Road. 2, site plan review ordinance section 4C1 to reduce the minimum required two-way driveway width from 26 to 22 feet. Both existing driveways on Roundwood Drive will remain two-way and at their existing width of 24 and 22 feet. Conditions, 1, prior to the start of construction, the applicant shall schedule a pre-construction meeting. The meeting shall include appropriate town staff, the developer, and their site contractor, and is to be coordinated through the planning department. 2, the below must be addressed prior to the scheduling of the pre-construction meeting. A, address comments in the staff memo dated 8/19/24. This includes provision of an easement for construction and public access rights along Gorham Road near the intersection of Payne Road. B, provide a storm drain condition assessment of downstream system to verify that it is in good working order and has the capacity to accommodate runoff from the site. C, provide a detailed plan for the downtown storm drain system upgrades to accommodate runoff and from the site, including but not limited to culverts, storm drain pipes, and ditching. Approval of proposed plan is required from the Public Works and Engineering departments prior to beginning the start of construction at the site. D, address comments in the Haley Ward memo dated 8/6/24. E, address comments in the Barton and Low Judice memo dated 8/5/24. F, pay the sidewalk in lieu fee to be reviewed and approved by the town engineer and planning department. G, address planning board comments discussed in the 8/19/24 meeting. This includes 1, update the plan to accommodate fire department concerns. H, provide the final full plan set to the planning department. This shall include all site and civil plans, landscape plans, lighting plans, and architectural renderings and elevations. I, payment of all outstanding review fees and invoices. This shall be reviewed by the planning department. 3, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall A, pay impact fees totaling $17,787.31. Payne Road, Zone 1, $1,793.16. Payne Road, Zone 2, $6,433.24. Payne Road, Zone 3, $6,487.65. Payne Road, Zone 5, $3,073.26. 4, prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall A, submit evidence in the form of a letter from a professional engineer certifying that all stormwater systems on the site and off-site have been installed and are functioning per the approved plan. B, request an inspection by the planning department to ensure compliance with this planning board approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Hebert. Doreen?
Rick Monking,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Rachel Hendrickson.
Yes.
And James Hebert.
Yes.
Congratulations. The project passes.
Thank you.
Item 4.07, 70 Higas Parkway Higas LLC, Sid Harvey Supply, is requesting a site plan amendment review to allow additional pavement to be constructed on the site to facilitate the maneuvering of larger semi-trailers into the south side loading dock, as well as reflecting as building building conditions. The project is located at 70 Higas Parkway, Assessors Map R050, Lot 35A, for the town, please.
Thank you. With the recent CO and company that moved in, they did discover that they needed additional turnaround areas shown in this paved area. When we went out to do our condition compliance check, we have a performance guarantee in place, but they were missing landscaping trees along the back buffer. There are existing trees along there, along the property line, so they've coupled that request as well. We have a couple of things we'd like them to add. There was one issue, there's a curb in front of the accessible parking spaces, so that needed to be put back to a tip down to get people up to the ramps. But other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Leave it to the applicant.
Thank you. And for the applicant.
Thank you to the board. Steve Bushy with Goral Palmer Consulting Engineers. Reflected on this. I think this was approved in 2019, 5 years ago. As stated, Sid Harvey is a national distributor. This building was originally constructed with 2 spaces. We thought there was going to be 2 spaces and perhaps a loading dock on both sides. Sid Harvey's taken the full building. They are I think, an East Coast distributor. I just looked it up. They have 77 locations, I guess, up and down the East Coast. HVAC, heating and cooling equipment and that sort of thing. So, you know, a nice location, a nice addition here, I guess, to Scarborough, just off the highway and so forth. They have their primary loading dock, though, now on, I'll call it the east side of the building. The loading dock on the west side is just an at-grade overhead door. Yeah, they found out within the first week or so that they once or twice a week have one of the larger semi-trailer trucks that makes its delivery out of New York or Pennsylvania or something like that. The site really had been designed for like Cisco trucks and box trucks and so forth to get into that loading dock. And they just were going out into the grassed area and kind of ripping things up. So we needed to add some pavement. It's going to involve a relocation of a light pole base, as you can see there on the plan. Trucks will pull in off of Higas and then back into that space. And then we have some additional pavement so they can pull back out. The loading dock has concrete walls and they have to be able to clear the concrete wall with the back of the truck. So that's why we have to kind of widen that out. A few peer review comments related to the under drain soil filter that's kind of in the lower left-hand corner of that plan. I actually went out there tonight and did my own measurements to kind of see where we stood with things. I think we're fine. So we'll reply to that effect to that comment about that little basin. And then finally, the vegetation. Interestingly enough, the neighbors were here and they asked me, "Are you with that project?" I said, "Yeah." So they asked me a few questions in regards to the project and what it was all about. And I think that satisfied their concerns. I asked them, I said, "Well, you know, one of our things as well is here's the back of the building. So here's the building over here. The trees, predominantly, probably 90% of the pine trees that are there, there's a lot of them. It's thick. You can barely walk through it. The neighbor had planted. There's a few that are on, I guess, our side of the line, so to speak. But they basically agreed with the idea of, geez, you don't need to plant anymore. It's pretty thick. We can't see anything through there. So I guess that's fine by us. We didn't know what that was all about, but that's the fundamental piece. The site right now is still under performance guarantee coverage because a number of things, the landscaping, besides these trees, there's a lot of landscaping that will be done here in September, as well as the final surface pavement. And when that surface pavement gets done, I believe that will also address the ADA parking in front of the doors, because right now there's a fairly substantial lip there and it's not really ADA compliant. So once the surface pavement goes in, then that'll get restored, I guess I would offer. And so we came quickly once they learned that they needed the additional pavement. And before we knew the fall season here for finishing this project up was going to be in place. So we're thankful that the staff was able to get us before you folks, and hopefully you'll take that under consideration, and we look forward to any questions you have.
Thank you. I'm looking at the room to see if there's anybody out there with care to make a public comment. Is there anyone online? No one. Public comment period is over. I will turn this over to the board in no particular order. Jim,
Can you tell me where these 14 spruce trees are going to be removed on the site as part of the comments, or have they not been planted?
No, they had not been planted
Not
yet.
been planted yet, okay. Did you know where initially where those were intending to be planted? Were there? In the back, okay.
Here. So here was the original landscape plan. I think we had 17 or 19 of those Austrian spruce that were gonna run right along that back line. And I guess in hindsight, was 5 years. I think those pines must have been planted at the time that we did this, but the site was wooded and just didn't have the realization that, geez, once we cleared it and realized, oh, there's a lot of pine trees that the neighbor had planted at one point in time or another in that side. I mean, they're like 4 or 5 deep, and they're 4 feet, 5 feet apart.
Okay,
So they're really thick.
great. Tell me about the front of, I guess on its face, I don't have an opposition to this. But I guess if there were, I guess, additional plantings of trees that the 2019 board wanted to have, I guess it would be nice to have them shown maybe elsewhere. Are deliveries to this site intended to be sort of anyone can kind of drive up and go in, or is this more for scheduled deliveries?
Generally scheduled deliveries, as much as I've been told. So having visited the site here a few times since I've been in operation, that's not a real big crowd of people there. I think probably most of their clients come in early in the morning and they're getting their equipment and then they're gone for the rest of the day. I've been there a couple of times when the large trucks were coming in. It was, I don't know, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning. And they were taking 20 minutes to 30 minutes to kind of maneuver their truck to get in to the loading dock space just because they didn't have the room. So they were going back and forth quite a bit.
Sure.
So
Okay. And forgive me, I don't have a clear image of this in my head. Is it open from the front of the building straight to Haggis Parkway? Can you see right in?
no, there is
Or-
several good stands of trees. There's one break though in the middle where there was a water line that was installed. And then there's another line over here that was the sewer line that's open. So if you're going eastbound, go past the beacon, nope, you have a little opening that you can kind of see the corner of the building, and then there's pretty decent trees. Then there's another openings where you can see basically the front entrance and then a grouping of trees before you get to the driveway. So it's not too bad. We do have, I think we'll see some of those supplemental trees that'll be put in place that just haven't been planted yet, but the plan is this September is when all the plantings will be finalized and done.
Okay. Then I guess my only comment would be to ensure that the plantings that are on the plan that are not impacted by this, to make sure those are followed through and those are put in place. Otherwise, I have no further comment.
thank you. Who's next? Roger?
This, I mean, your request seems pretty reasonable to me, so I'm just kind of curious, as well as the waiver with the trees in the back. I mean, that makes no sense to plant any trees there. Is this going to have any impact? If I recall, there was going to be 2 additional buildings on this site.
Yeah, that was our master plan going back to that like 2018, 19 timeframe.
Yeah.
And that is a potential plan because there's still some acreage here. There's at least, I think, 3 or 4 more acres to the east.
Yeah.
At this point in time, I'm not working on anything, and I don't think that there's any immediate plans. And we'd always been committed that a couple of different things. You have to come back before the board for a site plan approval. And any additional development on that lot's gonna begin to trigger DEP stormwater and a number of other things. So this initial phase had kept us under the other thresholds for state permitting, just kept it local, but so,
And
hence-
this will have no impact?
no.
Okay, all right, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
Yeah, I think it's a sharp looking building and glad to see it's gonna get wrapped up and all the landscaping put in. And I'm okay with not having those trees planted. Based on the fact that those did look pretty healthy that, on that picture you showed me, but I'll leave it up to you guys to determine if it's a healthy plant. That's it.
You all set, Ben?
Yeah, I really have no comments to add. So thank you,
All
Madam
right.
Chair.
So,
Jen has no comments. I don't, let me just ask you about the trees because I do remember being there. Is there any space where a couple of trees could be added, or is it really solid all the way across the extent of the property?
So a couple things going on. What I try to represent in this picture, hopefully you can see it well enough. The red line is actually like a foot inside from the property line. The property line is into the trees. So it's kind of hard to get to it, but I kind of want to represent that. We have this roof drip edge at the back of the building. And then there's a little bit of a slope for 4 or 5 feet. And that was thought to be, if we weren't granted relief on planting those trees where they would need to go. Ideally, I'd like to just put some mulch or hydroseed that entire slope and just grass it off and call it a day, given the thickness of the pine trees.
I think the only, the sort of concern I have is that if those trees belong to somebody else, right now they're doing just wonderfully as a screen. If that property is sold and somebody else comes along and says, I don't need all these trees, or I want to harvest them or use them for Christmas trees or whatever, all of a sudden there is no buffering back there. If it's trees that this site owns, then, the buffering is clear. I was just trying to figure out if there was language to indicate that should those pine trees in the other property go, would we like to see, as a board, would we like to see buffering there? And that's a hypothetical. Is the property in back of it residential or Haggis Parkway? Okay,
It's
so
part
if
of-
anybody else goes back there, we can require them to put in the trees.
Yeah, that's a pretty big parcel. And I conjecture here, I think that owner may have in the past been looking at some different opportunities or development things, because they have their ponds and
Hmm.
they have a fair amount of acreage in there. And then to the right would be the beacon. Or to the
Okay.
west.
All right, I think we, personally, that, I don't think we need to require you to put in the trees. But, I like your idea of hydroseeding. Are there any other, and mulching and hydroseeding? Good. Are there any other comments? No, in that case, I have a motion for 70 Higas Parkway Site Plan Review. I move to approve the project titled Sid Harvey Supply proposed by 70 Higas LLC as depicted in plan set provided, sets provided by Goral Palmer dated 7/22/24 with the following findings and conditions. Findings: the project amends the Phase 1 approval originally approved in 2019 to construction additional pavement area in the parking lot to assist in truck delivery and turning. The amendment also updates several items to the as-built condition, including lighting, bollards, fire hydrant location, and landscaping. The planning board has reviewed the application and supporting documentation and finds that the proposed design of the site plan adequately addresses the site plan review and zoning ordinance with the following conditions. Conditions: 1, prior to start of the construction for the additional paving, the applicant shall: A, address staff comments dated 8/19/24. B, address comments in the Haley Ward memo dated 8/6/24. C, address planning board comments discussed in the 8/19 meeting. This includes to add mulch and hydroseed the area. The trees are proposed to be removed. The trees, I think we need to change that because the trees are not planted.
To be removed from the plan.
To be the tree. Okay, let's try this again. C, address planning board comments discussed in the 8/19/24 meeting. This includes: 1, add mulch and hydroseed the area. 2, the trees are proposed to be removed from the plan. D, provide the final full plan set to the planning department. This shall include all site and civil plans, landscape plans, lighting plans, and architectural renderings and elevations. E, pay all review fees and invoices. This shall be reviewed by the planning department. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Roger Beely. Doreen, please call the roll.
Mike King,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yeah, yes.
Rachel Hendrickson,
Yes,
and James Hebert.
Yes.
thank you. And it passes.
Thank you to the board.
Five point oh one, staff report, minor amendments.
Minor development amendments, we don't have any.
5.02, administrative amendment.
We have one, it's the small gazebo with the Kalerville home on Black Point Road.
All right, and are there additional staff comments concerning the site walk?
The only thing I was gonna remind you about the site visit on September 9th from 4 to 6. I will be sending you all out a meeting. We're trying to figure out exactly where to meet at the Downs. And I'm gonna see if I can I'm gonna try, I don't know if I wanna drive it, the community services vehicle to see if we can carpool because there is limited parking where we're going. And then the next meeting, at your regular meeting, we'll have a workshop and that will start at 5. And I will say today was the submittal, so that's actually a really nice day for a workshop because we only had 2 new submittals. So
Ooh.
Eric's missing out. He says hello, by the way. For building permits and starts, we had a pre-construction meeting with the hotel on the Scarborough site in Payne. There's been a preload out there for quite some time, but you'll start to see some activity pretty soon. The Wood Springs Hotel, I do apologize. We had a joint meeting with council, and after some further pushback and some attorney questions, we don't actually have to do that amendment for that Cabela site. I had thought they were gonna submit for this next go round, but they did not. They'll submit for the October meeting. So we'll just go through the regular site plan process. So not a contract zone. Other than that, our next regular meeting is September 16th.
All right, thank you. 6.01, correspondence.
None at this time.
6.02, planning board comments. Roger?
Just a quick one for Autumn. On these site visit protocol. Board members should refrain from engaging in individual conversations with the applicant, each other, or members of the public. I've been on a number of sidewalks and we usually, there's small talk. Like, that's a no-no. Like if you see somebody you know, that you recognize, or they say hi to you, you say, can't talk to you? I mean, just a clarification. I don't want to get arrested.
The protocol is what you all have used before. I
Oh, you
think.
Did you say abused?
Sometimes.
I think, the idea is that you keep it, if it's a casual, hello, how are you? That's perfectly fine, but try not to have a lot of conversation and, in-depth questions. Just-
The concern is, and we've heard this from the MMA and from the attorney, that everybody hears the same thing. So if there's a side comment over there, you may be talking about your kid's baseball, but other people are looking at a member of the board talking to a member of the public. I mean, and that's what they're seeing. They're not seeing what the conversation is. So to the extent possible, we need to make sure that everybody hears what's going on. And that was the purpose of it.
Because I know in, the last one I can recall was the, mobile home park way out there on.
Yep,
Crystal Springs.
Crystal Springs.
Yeah, we were kind of gathered in a circle and people were just chatting, small talk with each other, you know? We weren't talking about the specifics of that project, you know?
Yeah, I understand, and we do get sloppy now and then, and it gets casual. But the protocol is what is recommended by the attorneys. And to the extent that we can carry it out, we need to do that. I'm going to try and ensure a site walk is for the board. It is not for public comment. So I'm going to not accept questions from the public. We are going to be hearing about the town center frequently. A lot of meetings where there will be ample opportunity. But I do want to make sure that the members of the public have an opportunity to hear everything that's going on. Yeah, so to the extent that there's side talk, all of a sudden somebody back there is thinking, you know, there's something else happening. It can turn into a free-for-all if all of a sudden we start asking questions, asking questions, or the public starts asking questions and somebody answers it. So I'm going to try to keep it strictly according to the protocol. The same thing when when we get to the workshop, it's going to be very similar. A workshop is not open for comments from the public. But I think in terms of ensuring full transparency on something that is of great interest to many people in town, we need to be kind of disciplined in the work that we do and the questions that we ask. We will have opportunity to ask questions of the Downs folks. And I'll try and treat that as though we're at a meeting where you say, you know, Madam Chair, so that I'm making sure that everybody has a chance to ask the questions. But yeah, at the Crystal Springs, it got a little casual. And there weren't many people around. So it was kind of easy. I suspect once this is advertised, we will see members of the Long Range Planning. We will see members of Conservation Commission. We will see members of the Town Center Committee. We will see a lot of folks. We will see a lot of folks who live in the Downs that will want to find out what's going on and what the plans are. So we owe it to them to afford them the opportunity to hear everything as transparently as possible, but within some guidelines. So I you know, that's my plan. I recall we've used these protocols before, and we were pretty good with them for, you know, 3 or 4 site walks, and then we started to again get just a little casual around it. This is one where clearly we really there's going to be a lot of interest generated. And we want to make sure that everybody sees and hears the whole conversation. So that when somebody says, well, I heard this, the answer is, no, I was there and this is what happened. That we ensure the public has the greatest opportunity to hear what is proposed, what the options are. Any other board comments? Questions? By the next time we hold a meeting, school will be started. Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there anybody who objects? Seeing no objections? We're adjourned.